When I was in college, I tried out for the basketball team. Because I played basketball in high school. I wasn't an amazing player, like I've said, but I was a solid contributor. And so I tried out for the college basketball team, and I didn't make it. And I tried out again, and I didn't make it. And so I'm in a small Bible college, and I'm kind of a loser, I couldn't make the basketball team. There weren't that many people. We weren't all that good. But anyway, so I heard about the soccer team. And the soccer team needed warm bodies, basically, They were recruiting anybody and everybody. And so I said yes, and so I joined the soccer team. And I began to play, go to practices and join in. Well, there was a guy on the team named Ben Parks. Now, he went to a pretty big high school in the Atlanta area. He played basketball, he played soccer, he was pretty athletic, he was well liked by the other guys. Well, one time I was walking to the dorm room in the upper level, and Ben was coming from the other direction, and I was walking past him. And for whatever reason, I forget why, I didn't have a shirt on. So I was just walking down the hall, and he was coming the other direction. And he looked right at me, and he was just this kind of guy. He just looks right at me and says, "David, you are the most unripped person that I've ever met." And for those of you who don't know, that means that you have no muscles. And I was crushed. I couldn't believe he said that to me, but that's Ben. But you know what? I had not lifted a weight in my entire growing up years. And you know what that did to me? I got so upset by that I went to the weight room. And I spent several months, and I taught myself, and I lifted weights 2-3 times a week. And after a few months' time, I kind of bulked up. I got to where I played fullback on the soccer team. And when people would run into me, they would fall back. And I got to be a little bit, bulky. But the triumph was when Ben Parks noticed that. He noticed that over this time period, I'd been working out. And so I was really satisfied to know that he noticed that. But the important point is that I got upset, and that I did something about it, and I wanted something to change. It motivated me to change something about myself. Now, we've all encountered something that we wanted very badly to be different. We've all encountered that, maybe many times, maybe in this season of your life. What were you willing to do to change what you wanted to be different? Were you willing to start something? Were you willing to stop something? Were you willing to buy something, right? Just drop that money down and go buy something? Were you willing to sell something? Were you willing to pray about it? Were you willing to take action to see that thing be different? Were you willing to persist? Last week we discussed how Nehemiah's heart was broken by the plight of his people. His heart was broken by the need to the point where he was ready to move beyond prayer to participation. And he was willing to take action and to ask God for favor as he acted to see God change the situation. Today we're going to see how God used Nehemiah to begin to drive the change that Nehemiah himself wanted to see. We're going to see the first step that Nehemiah took, and we're going to see how God began to use him to drive the change that he wanted to see. So turn to Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. We're going to read it through at one time, and then I'm going to take it verse by verse. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought before him, I took wine and gave it to the king. Now Nehemiah was the cupbearer, so this was a normal activity for him. But I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, "Why does your face look sad when you are not ill?" This can be nothing but sadness of heart. So he's clearly upset. I was very much afraid. But I said to the king, "May the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my fathers are buried lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" The king said to me, "What is it you want?" Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my fathers are buried so that I can rebuild it." Then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked me, "How long will your journey take? And when will you get back?" So it's a surprising response. It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I also said to him, If it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the king's forest, so he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king, this is the king, granted my requests. So I went to the governors of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. The king had also sent army officers and cavalry with him. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. So looking back at verse 1, Nehemiah comes into the presence of the king. This is a normal thing for him. He's the cupbearer, but he takes a chance, and he's willing to express emotion in the presence of the king. Now maybe, at first glance, you and I don't realize, but this would have been incredibly inappropriate for Nehemiah. To show sadness, to show any emotion in the presence of his superior. Now think about in your place of business, or if you're in front of an important official, or if you're in court. I mean, when you're dealing with the boss, when you're dealing with the guy with the power, how are you going to behave? How are you going to behave? You're going to be very careful. You're going to be very particular. You're going to dot your I's and cross your T's, and you're going to watch your step, because this guy is the guy. But Nehemiah, he takes a chance. He lets his guard down. Now think about your and my interactions with our superiors, maybe at work. What drives us? Ambition, right? I'm going to watch my step because I want to progress. And this is a very real concern for Nehemiah. Or it's just self-preservation, right? I want to do my job. I want to be that guy. I want to be the yes guy. I want to be the person that can get things done. But here's Nehemiah taking a chance. And I think it's a calculated risk. Because his heart is broken. God's moved on him. He's ready to take steps. And so he takes a chance and expresses his emotion in the presence of the king. Verse 2, the king inquires about Nehemiah's emotional state. He says, "Why does your face look so sad when you are not ill?" This can be nothing but sadness of heart. And here we see the king's wisdom. I mean, he has a lot of experience. He's met with a lot of people, and he can sense immediately that something's not right with Nehemiah. Something is not right. So likely the only thing more unusual than Nehemiah expressing his emotion in the presence of the king is that the king notices, and he points out Nehemiah's emotional state. Now, we have no way of knowing the tone of this question, right? He might be saying, he might be caring and saying, "Nehemiah, what's wrong, my friend?" He might be stern and saying, "Hey, what's the matter with you?" Like, "I'm the boss. This is inappropriate." He might just be indifferent and just say, "Hey, what's up? What's going on with you?" But regardless of this, Nehemiah's behavior has called attention to himself in the king's presence. And that's a risky move. When you think about the story of Esther, when she goes before the king and she requests to meet with him, it could mean her life. It could cost her everything. But Nehemiah takes a chance. He takes the risk. And the king asks him, "What's the matter?" Because this could amount to a death sentence for Nehemiah. And then verse 3. "I was very much afraid, and he was appropriately afraid. But I said to the king, 'May the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my fathers are buried lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire?'" Now he immediately shows deference and respect for the king, but he doesn't shy away from sharing his heart, no matter the cost. Now this is an indicator that somebody's called by God, isn't it? When they're willing to take a chance, when they're willing to risk a lot, risk everything for the sake of somebody else. I mean, Nehemiah's not looking out for himself here. He's caring about these people, and he's willing to risk everything for his countrymen. That's a sure sign that somebody is called by God to do something. Verse 5. Or verse 4. "The king said to me, 'What is it you want?' And then I prayed to the God in heaven." So the king says, "What is it that you want to be different?" Surprisingly, the king offers to help. The king seems to be offering to help. The king himself probably doesn't have this particular burden, right? It's not his people. It's Nehemiah's people. But he cares enough about Nehemiah to ask, "What is it that you want? What is it that you actually want to be different?" Now, often God uses people in positions of influence to assist those that he's given a burden to do his will. Now this is an important question that Nehemiah would not have been ready to answer had he not prayerfully thought about what he actually wanted to be different. So the king says, what is it you want? And Nehemiah spent time thinking and praying. What is it that I actually want to be different about this situation? The walls torn down, the city's in shambles. I want the city to be rebuilt. And he's actually thought about, as we'll see here in just a moment, he's gone beyond that. He's thought about what he wants to be different, and he's thought about what role God wants him to play in. So the king says, what do you want? So what has Nehemiah done? He has decided what he wants to do. Verse 5, he says, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my fathers are buried, so that I can rebuild it. So Nehemiah knows what he wants to be different, and he's prayerfully begun to develop a plan. He knew what he wanted to be different, and he was willing to drive the project. And what does that mean? He sees something that needs to be done. He doesn't say, God, you do something about it. God, you raise up something to do. You raise up someone to do something about this problem. I'm willing to put my hands on the wheel. I'm willing to put myself on the line. So that is his plan. Verse 6, the king, with the queen beside him, says, how long will your journey take? And when will you get back? And it pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. It's interesting that when the king says, how long is it going to take? Give me a time frame. Nehemiah does not request more time, does he? Did you notice that? He doesn't say, king, I have this burden. I know something needs to be done. I'm ready to take action, but give me some time to think about it. Give me a couple of weeks. Give me some time to pray. Give me some time to think about what needs to be done. Give me some time to think about what role I need to play. But he doesn't do that. When he sees that the king wants to help, he goes ahead and he sets a time. So you can see what's been going on in Nehemiah's mind and heart, that God has been preparing him to do this work. So Nehemiah, he's decided what he wants to be different. He's prayerfully thought out a plan of action. But it's not a complete plan. I mean, think of what he's proposed. He hasn't given them detailed plans for the project. He's just said, something needs to be done. Send me to go do it. So he's thought out a plan of action. And he's asked God for favor. As we see him, he prays to God. Again, not asking for direction. He prays to God asking for favor. Because he's already decided what he wants to be different. He's thought about his role. And now he's asking for favor as he takes steps. So what is vision this morning? This is what God has done in Nehemiah. He's shown him a need, and Nehemiah now has a vision for what he wants to be different. And that's all that vision is. When God moves on your heart and my heart, we see a situation, we say, that's not right. That needs to be different. And God gives us a vision for how it can be different. So God had given Nehemiah a vision. Verse 7 and 8, I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, so they'll provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the king's force, so he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of God was upon me, the king granted my requests. So Nehemiah has risked everything, and the king has responded favorably. And so what does Nehemiah do? Does he say, thank you, king. Thank you, king. I'm so grateful. Let me shrink away now. I've gotten enough out of this. No, he gets bold. What is he realizing here? He sees that he's taken a big chance and that God is showing favor. And so he gets really bold and he asks for protection. Can you imagine this? Asking the king, hey, king, now that you've agreed to my request, can you do something else for me? Can you do two somethings? Can you give me official letters? Can you give me safe passage? Can you give me building materials out of your own resources, out of your own wealth? So what Nehemiah has realized is that God is behind this. And even though Nehemiah has his hands on the wheel, it's God driving. Now think about that. What an exciting moment for Nehemiah. He's put it all on the line. He's put his hands on the wheel. And he realizes that God is the one driving. And then he gets bold. And then he asks the king for what he can do for Nehemiah and what he can do for Nehemiah's people. Because the gracious hand of my God was upon me. Nehemiah was ready for this important work because number one, God had moved his heart. He saw the need. He was ready to go beyond prayer to participation. Number two, God had engaged his head. He actually thought about what he wanted to be different, and he had thought about what role God had for him to play. And then thirdly, he was now ready to engage his hands. He was ready to pray for God's favor as he took action to address the needs. So a few lessons for us this morning. Number one is that God is looking for people who will drive change. God is looking for people who will drive change. People like Nehemiah, people who see a need and they're moved by the need to beyond prayer to participation. And they're moved by the need to the point where they're ready to be like Nehemiah and to make a plan. As we discussed last week, God needs people who will go beyond thinking. They'll go beyond feeling. They'll go beyond believing to where they're ready to take action. He needs people who will tackle complex issues. Think about this. This was complicated. How was Nehemiah going to get this done? He didn't have the ability. But he was willing to tackle it and take it head on and put his hands on the wheel and said, I'm going to go because this needs to be done. But he's going to be depending on God's favor every step. He is tackling the complex issue. He's running right towards the mess, but he's depending on God's favor every step of the way. Several years ago, I was having breakfast with a gentleman from our church at the time, and it was kind of odd because we were talking about his philosophy of life, and he was talking about how he personally chose to invest his resources. So it's a financial conversation. But I was impressed because he talked about the traditional method of investing is to allow other people to invest your money. He preferred to be driving his own car. And knowing what I knew about the guy, I think that characterizes his life. And I was scared by that. I was scared because how can somebody be confident enough to make decisions for their own life? At that time, I wasn't one of those people. But I was so impressed by that idea of taking the wheel. And I think what God's looking for, he's not looking for arrogant people. He's not looking for people who have all the answers, but he is looking for people who are willing to take the wheel. Take steps. Move forward. And then when God shows favor, we realize that it's actually him driving. So God is looking for people who will drive change. God doesn't need someone with a complete plan and all the answers. Nehemiah didn't have a complete plan, and he certainly didn't have all the answers, but he was willing. He was willing. The second lesson this morning, and we look at Nehemiah and we look at the king, is that God may have already positioned you for impact. God may have already positioned you for impact. Maybe you're a Nehemiah. Maybe God's moved your heart. Maybe he's put a burden on your heart for a problem, for a need, for a situation that you feel compelled to address. But you need help. You need favor. You need assistance. You're ready to act, but you don't know what to do. You don't know how it's going to happen. You need help. Maybe this morning, God's positioned you like the king. You're someone who's in position to assist. Now again, this wasn't the king's burden. This wasn't the king's problem, but he was moved by the fact that his servant was affected. And he was willing to assist and to leverage his authority, his resources, what God had given him to assist Nehemiah as he fulfilled his calling. So who are you this morning? Maybe God's put something on your heart and you're nervous about it. We understand this. We've done this. Moving overseas, you're scared. You're affected by the need, but you don't know what to do next. You know you're going to need help. Maybe that's you this morning. Maybe you're like the king and you have authority or you have position and God's given you opportunity. He's given you wisdom to share. He's given you ways that you can assist somebody who has a burden. So how has God positioned you today for impact? And then thirdly, you don't have to be someone else. Just be who God created you to be. When we begin to feel God moving in our hearts that we need to take action, we immediately begin to object, right? Think of Moses. He said, I'm not a good speaker. I'm the wrong guy, God. You've put me in the wrong place. I'm just a shepherd. I'm out in the wilderness. I'm a nobody. And that's one of the first things that you and I think when we feel God stirring in our hearts, isn't it? We start to say, God, I'm in the wrong position for impact. I'm not one of those people. If you want me to be somebody that I'm not, if you want me to be somebody bold and courageous and outgoing, I'm not. That's not me. But the encouraging thing is, look at Nehemiah as an example of God positioned him perfectly to do his will. And Nehemiah didn't have to stop being a cupbearer. He didn't have to start becoming a construction supervisor, although he did do those things. I mean, was Nehemiah qualified to do what God called him to do? But because he was willing to take steps, we see that the unqualified person that was called became equipped by God. So you don't have to be someone else. You know, this makes me think of my friend Cindy Little. You know, if you know her, for Fish. And she's a delightful person. She used to be a bookkeeper. And years ago, she began volunteering for Fish, which is Faith in Serving Humanity, our community cooperative that meets needs in the community. And she began volunteering, then all of a sudden, over a series of events, she becomes the executive director. And you just got to love Cindy because she's so comfortable in her own skin. She doesn't try to be anything that she's not. And she'd be the first person to tell you that she is not qualified to be doing what she's doing, if you know her. But she is called. And when you spend 5 minutes with her, you know that God's got a calling on her life to make a big, big difference in this community. And she's not qualified, but she is called. And that's what God is looking for. He's looking for people just willing to take the wheel, people willing to take a step, and to find out that it's actually God driving. So, how can you and I prepare for God to make His move? How can we prepare for God to make His move? Because it's not us actually doing it. We're just responding. Number one, decide what you want to be different. Decide what you want to be different. When God moves on your heart with a need or a situation, and be specific. You know, I've had many tender moments with my kids. When they're hurting, when they're struggling, when they're suffering. And maybe it's just a boo-boo. You know, maybe it's they're embarrassed or upset about something. But you know what I say to them? Almost without exception, I say, Daddy's going to make it better. Mommy's going to make it better. I'm going to make it better. I don't know how. I don't know that I have the ability to fix it completely. But whatever it takes, I'm going to make it better. Even if just a little bit. So decide what you want to be different. And are you resolved with the thing that God's put on your heart? The person that God's put on your heart? The situation that God's put on your heart? Are you resolved to make it better? So decide what you want to be different. Number two, create a plan of action. It doesn't have to be a complete plan, but create a plan of action. Are you going to be a person who's going to assist? Like the king. Maybe God's positioned you to be innocent to assist. And there are organizations throughout the county that are meeting needs. Just ask Lee, he's got a list. And you've got Fish, you've got Team Up Mentoring, you've got Boys and Girls Club, you've got all kinds of organizations, Pregnancy Resource Center, Christian Learning Center, that are addressing needs. And you can assist those people as they're on mission to meet these needs. So are you the person to assist and create a plan of what you're going to do? Or maybe you're a person that's God's calling to drive change. Maybe you're like a Nehemiah, where God's put something on your heart. He's moved you beyond prayer participation. You're ready to act, and He wants you to make a plan. And you know what I've found when it comes to getting things done? The only step you have to plan is the next one. Especially when it comes to this kind of thing, because you take a step like Nehemiah did, and then he sees God's favor. And then the other steps just kind of follow in quick succession. So are you going to assist, or are you going to drive change? And then number three, pray for favor as you take steps toward this vision becoming a reality. And what is a vision? It's just something that you feel like needs to be different. And like Nehemiah was, you know, we need to be open to God's redirection, but pray for favor as you take steps. And then fourthly and lastly, when God shows favor, be bold. When you're moved, when you take steps and you see God's favor, be bold. Be daring. When we experience God's favor, we do realize that it's Him driving. I wanted to close with another story about George Mueller. We told one last week. This is a powerful example of a man and his wife who were moved by God to meet the needs of orphans. And this is just one example of how God provided for him. The children are dressed and ready for school, but there's no food for them to eat. These kids were living in his house. The house mother of the orphanage informed George that the children were dressed and ready for school, but there's no food for them to eat. George asked her to take the 300 children into the dining room and have them sit at tables. He thanked God for the food and waited. George knew God would provide food for the children as he always did. Within minutes, a baker knocked on the door. "Mr. Mueller," he said, "last night I could not sleep. Somehow I knew that you would need this bread this morning. I got up and baked 3 batches for you. I'll bring it in." Soon, there was another knock at the door. It was the milkman. His cart had broken down in front of the orphanage. The milk would spoil by the time the wheel was fixed. He asked George if he could use some free milk. George smiled as the milkman brought in 10 large cans of milk. It was just enough to feed 300 thirsty children. God had given George and Mary a vision, something they believed needed to be different. He moved on their hearts. He engaged their minds to think about their role, and he continued time and time again. And George recorded it all in a journal. All the ways in which God provided for every single one of these orphans that God cares about. Now, what if we were willing to allow our hearts to be broken as God's heart is broken? What if we're willing to dream big dreams about change that needs to happen? Just in our hearts, like I would with my kids. I just want to make it better. I just want to make it better. I'm not going to fix it completely. I'm not going to be able to change everything. I just want to make it better. What if we'd be willing to dream with God? What if we were to go beyond dreaming, to consider our role in making it better? Is God calling you to assist? And just say, how can I help? There's a need. How can I help? There's a need. How can I help? There's people meeting that need. How can I help? Or maybe God's calling you to drive. And he's saying to you, he's moving on your heart and my heart. He's saying, there's a need out there that's going unmet. I need somebody to put their hands on the wheel. Because, I'll be honest with you, as your pastor, it's been enjoyable being in your homes, getting to know you personally. I hope to do that even more. But as I get to know you, I get to know your stories. I get to know your struggles, your challenges. I'm always impressed with what God's done in your life. And I'm encouraged. I believe in you. I believe that God has plans for each one of you. I believe that God has used your experiences to prepare you to meet needs, to drive change, to assist Nehemiahs as they pursue change. And you know what? God believes in you too. We think about believing in God, but God believes in us. We are his plan. We're his plan, the church. God wants to use us to drive change or to assist change. And as we experience God's favor while we take steps, when you see that God's providing, that God is opening doors, and then we become bold and daring. Don't we want to be that? Maybe not you, but I do. I want to be the hero, I want to do something with my life. I want to change things. But I can't do it by myself. I need God's assistance. He needs our assistance. That's his plan. We are his plan. Don't miss out on playing your part. So this morning, what is God asking you to do? What is God asking you to consider? What step is he leading you to take so that you can assist or so that you can pray? Pray. God, thank you for this morning. Thank you for this message that you've given us this morning, God. How you used just a regular guy, Nehemiah, to enact incredible change. And when you moved his heart to take steps, God, he was willing to risk it all, lay it all on the line, and then find out, maybe to his surprise, that you're faithful. that you had provided for him. And then he became so encouraged and so impassioned and emboldened by your provision, God, that he just took incredible, daring steps to bring about something that we'll see that just seemed impossible. There was no way to turn it around. So God, I just pray that you'll give us the wisdom to know what to do and give us the ability to do it, God. It's in Jesus' name I pray.